Good morning. I'm Priscilla. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm so glad to be with you this morning. Our first reading today is from, I selected it because today is the Trans Day of Remembrance. So it comes from the Black Trans Prayer Book, which I highly recommend. And it comes from an essay that's called I'm Non-Binary and I Survived Catholic School by Marty S. And I'm going to actually read the conclusion of the essay. Some days, the most spiritual thing I can manage is to give myself permission to flow, to ignore questions, to accept my feelings as fact without having facts to support them. Throughout it all, when I could not speak, I could write. And in 1999, I found that when I could not speak, I could paint. Although still feeling estranged from God, I painted a series I called the Angel Series. With it, I asserted that we survivors are all angels. I did this over and over again. I relied on visual affirmations to get me through. And for most of my life, paint has been my only form of prayer. I have grown to accept three things. One, most religious spaces are extremely physically and emotionally unsafe spaces for me. Two, I have a right to a relationship with the divine that is self-defined and self-guided. It is creative and intuitive. It does not look like other spirituality or religiosity, and that is what works for me right now. My divine practice involves movement, dance, salsa, merengue, bachata, and especially kizomba. In the past, it has involved coperia, a spiritual summoning and remembering of my ancestors. My spirituality is always rooted in my heritage and my culture. Three, if there is a God, she is firmly on the side of the oppressed. She does not impose her authority. She does not demand obedience. She is the God of consent. She is trans and supports other trans beings. Z believes in the power of words, rages when we are misnamed or addressed in ways that do not make us feel empowered or seen. They stand by us. They see us. They know our pain and hear our cries, and they support us as we make the choices that we need to feel safe. That includes both turning away from and turning to them. Our second reading is from Psalm 46. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore, we will not fear, even if the earth should open up in front of us and mountains be toppled into the depths of the sea. Even if the earth's waters rage and foam and the mountains tremble with its heaving, there's a river whose streams gladden the city of God, the holy dwelling of the Most High. God is in the midst. It will never fall. God will help it at daybreak. Though nations are in turmoil and empires crumble, God's voice resounds and it melts the earth. Yahweh is with us. Our stronghold is the God of Israel. Come see what Yahweh has done. God makes the earth bounteous. God has put an end to war from one end of the earth to the other, breaking bows, splintering spears, and setting chariots on fire. Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted upon the earth. Yahweh is with us. Our stronghold is the God of Israel. When I was little, my brother and I had a huge book of fairy tales about the size of the Yellow Pages. For those of you who are too young to know how big that is, it's pretty big. That book and my mother single-handedly fostered my love of reading. So today, I want us to engage in some serious play with a story. Serious play sounds like an oxymoron, but if we search and find meaning in stories, we will learn something about ourselves and the world around us. Think about it. Fairy tales are the collective wisdom of our ancestors. There is a reason that they have survived for thousands of years, and it's more than just mere entertainment. We received all kinds of messages about the world from stories like Pinocchio, Snow White, and Cinderella. But the story I want to share today is called Frau Holle, also known as Mother Holle or Old Mother Frost. It's a German fairy tale collected by the Brothers Grimm in a book called Children and Household Tales from 1812. But I don't just want to share a retelling of the story. I want us to talk about an issue that many of us struggle with today and have this be an entry point for us. Are you exhausted? Not just tired, but completely world weary? Something a good night's sleep or a free weekend cannot cure you of? If so, Andrew G. Marshall and Dr. Libby Nugent say that the remedy to refresh your spirit just might be a fairy tale. In an episode of the Meaningful Life podcast that I recommend, if you're looking for one, they modeled how to use a fictitious story as an on-ramp to make meaning surrounding a real modern-day quandary. The reason that this resonated for me is that so many women that I talk to share how very exhausted they are, how they have been saddled with never-ending responsibility for as long as they can remember, and the extraction is depleting them. This experience is not necessarily relegated to women, although often there is a disproportionate weight of invisible labor. Would you describe yourself as world-weary? If not, it would probably be an apt descriptor for someone you care deeply about. Is it off the wall to think that a fairy tale could help? Maybe, but let's do it anyway. So getting back to the story of Frau Holle, a pre-Christian female legendary figure who survived in popular culture well into the 19th century. Once upon a time, there was a widow who had 2 daughters. The older daughter was her stepdaughter, and she was beautiful and industrious. The other, her biological child, was ugly, lazy, and spoiled. You get where this is going. The older daughter was the Cinderella of the house. Every day, the stepdaughter would sit outside the cottage and spin beside the well. One day, she pricked her finger on the point of the spindle, and as she leaned over the well to wash the blood away, the spindle fell down the wall and sank out of the well and sank out of sight. The stepdaughter feared that she would be punished for losing the spindle, and in a panic, she leapt into the well after it. Suddenly, the girl finds herself in a different land. She sees a meadow where she came upon an oven full of bread. The bread called out, "Oh, take me out or I'll burn. I've been thoroughly baked for a long time." So she steps up to it and with a baker's peel, a thin, flat, oversized spatula, I had to look it up, took everything out, one loaf after another, and then walked on. Then she came to a tree laden with apples. shake me, we apples are all ripe," cried the tree. So she shook the tree until all the apples fell as though it were raining apples. And then none were left. She gathered them up into a pile before continuing on her way. Finally, she came to a small house. An old woman was peering out from inside. She had very large teeth, which frightened the girl, and she wanted to run away. But the woman, who identified herself as Frau Holle, called out to her, "Don't be afraid, dear child. Stay here with me. And if you do my housework in an orderly fashion, it will go well with you. Only you must take care to make my bed well and shake it diligently until the feathers fly, as that will make it snow in your world." Because the woman spoke so kindly to her, the girl agreed and started in her service and took care to always shake the feathers until the feathers flew around like snowflakes. After a time, the girl became homesick and told Frau Halle that it was time for her to return home. Frau Halle had been impressed by the girl's kindness and hard work, so much so that she escorted her to the gate, and a shower of gold fell upon the girl. She also gave her the spindle which had fallen into the well. With that, the gate was closed, and the girl found herself back not far from her mother's house. Her mother wished the same good fortune for her other daughter, so she sent her to sit by the well and spin. But the girl deliberately threw the spindle into the well before jumping in herself. She wanted to speed things up. She too came to the oven, but would not assist with the bread, nor would she help the apple tree. When she came to Frau Halle's house, she likewise took service there. She then fell into her lazy, careless ways. Frau Halle soon dismissed her, and as the lazy girl stood at the gate, a kettle of tar was spilled over her. "That is what you have earned," said Frau Halle, and closed the gate. So what's the moral of this story? And why do men in stories get to fight dragons and women have to fall in wells? Who in the story do you most identify with? Is it the grieving, under-resourced mother who is understandably not always in the best mood and takes her troubles out on those around her? Is it the younger daughter who resists the gender roles that society tries to place on her, sets limits, and refuses to hustle to prove her worthiness? Do you feel as if you are covered in tar and your creativity and ability to play is constrained? Or do you identify most with the protagonist of the story? Are you like her in that there's a problem, you move towards it with a solution? Do you show up in a goal-oriented way of being that says, if I work hard today, I'll get gold tomorrow? What if every character represents a part of ourselves? When we don't take care of ourselves, it's as if we have our own internal wicked stepmother. Do you ever feel stuck doing things in only one way? Maybe letting something new in requires a collapse of some kind, as if we were falling into a well. Psalm 46 says, "Be still and know that I am God." There is a kind of hurry related to time that can feel like a form of violence. How do we rest in God? What wake-up call do you need to find yourself in a new world where you can determine if your old patterns are still working for you or not? In Wayne Muller's book, Sabbath, he says, if we do not allow for a rhythm of rest in our busy lives, illness becomes our Sabbath. Our pneumonia, our cancer, our heart attack, our accidents create Sabbath for us. How can you find your inner Frau Halle and speak kindly to yourself and value your own goldenness, even when you're not being industrious? How can you remind yourself that you are not lazy and spoiled when you choose to rest? In Genesis 2 in the Torah, it is written, "On the seventh day, God finished the work and ceased from all work. And God blessed the seventh day and declared it holy, because on it God ceased from all work of creation." The Hebrew word for Shabbat, used by God in Genesis, really translates to a stopping or ceasing rather than rest. God never tires. She did not rest on the seventh day. God is the one who never sleeps, slumbers, or needs rest. What we are called to do on the Sabbath is an abrupt end to whatever our usual labor is. There is a way to do that that is not legalistic. There are some activities that could be considered work that bring us such delight that we savor them for the Sabbath. Maybe it's being in your yard or planting flowers and being dazzled with color as you observe the beauty of creation. In this observance, we are reminded that if certain plant species do not lie dormant in the winter, they will not bear fruit in the spring. What is all of our work in service of? What is life-giving for you? If we only fix ourselves on goals, sometimes life can feel pointless. We'll miss the meaning-making and become weary, as we often do. The practice of Sabbath corresponds to the human desire for replenishment, freedom, delight, a way of life that works for us. Find time this week to sit quietly, to listen for what God wants to say about how you can live a Sabbath life. Try to find what your soul wants to say to God, and listen for God's invitation to you in this season. How might you experience, maybe for the first time, what it feels like to cease striving? God has a reward for your service that is golden. God lived this way first and shared it with us as the optimal way to live. Remember, God has already done the work of creating this sanctuary in time for us, and all we have to do is enter into it. Tranquility, serenity, peace, and harmony are gifts that God has waiting for you. May this message be part of your wake-up call. May you fall into a well and see things anew. This is God's good news. Amen.